Good evening, America, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Just the News. No noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you as always from the nation's capital and the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. You know this, Wired to Fish Coffee is my favorite coffee, the official coffee of Just the News. And because you are a member of the family, you can go and get a 10% discount off by going to wired2fishcoffee.com. Put in the promo code JustNews at checkout, 10% off on all the great blends and even the Just the News tumbler, which is a pretty cool item. Go check that out. All right, folks, a lot of news today. Supreme Court issuing a major ruling affirming that states have the right to reject Planned Parenthood from Medicaid. That will be followed in a couple of weeks by a vote in Congress to potentially defund Planned Parenthood at the federal level. Now, normally we take a deep dive into headlines, but today we're going to do something different. Amanda will be back tomorrow night. I'm going to team up today with the great Steve Gruber, my colleague here at Real America's Voice. We want to tackle a topic that you probably don't know much about, probably just started hearing about a couple weeks ago, but it is a serious problem. The threat, the growing threat of agroterrorism. You know about the 3 Michigan scientists, all from China, 3 Chinese scientists working in the United States in Michigan at the University of Michigan, being arrested, bringing in deadly pathogens to the United States. You know about the story we broke earlier this week on the show. 1,000 scientists have been brought into this country from hostile nations like China, working at the NIH. They weren't properly vetted. Now we're scrambling under the Trump administration to vet them. The potential for a famine-causing or food-disrupting agroterrorism act is higher than it's ever been. And tonight we're going to bring you into the real world, including introducing you to a defector from the Chinese scientific community, Dr. Li Mengyan. You may be amazed by her story and what she says China is plotting and planning. She knows. She worked for them. But before we get to all that, let me bring in my amazing co-host for the evening, the one, the only, Steve Gruber. Steve, good to have you on. Good to be teaming up with you tonight.
John, good to see you. Glad to be here, my friend.
Listen, this is such a great idea. I know you came up with this idea. I'm so excited. I don't think 6 months ago people were thinking, boy, I have to worry about famine in the United States because some roundworm or some pathogen is going to get released and could wipe out our crops. And then these 3 scientists get picked up. We're all a little bit more aware of things now.
Well, as you mentioned off the top, so many headlines. I mean, the news cycle is intense these days, to say the least. Donald Trump doesn't slow down. You've got the border, you've got the economy, you've got the Supreme Court, you've got the war in Iran. And we're missing the point that maybe one of the biggest stories is right under our noses. Our food supply is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to the Chinese Communist Party. It's vulnerable to the scientists at NIH that you just mentioned. It's vulnerable because we haven't been paying close enough attention, John, and we really need to, because if they can destroy the crops, they can destroy America without ever firing a shot.
Yeah, that's it. And by the way, that is the Chinese playbook. They don't want a kinetic war. They want to defeat us through these alternative means. I want to ask real quickly before we get to our first guest, you're at ground zero from where this story broke a few weeks ago. What has been the reaction in Michigan to realize that they had these scientists smuggling in these dangerous pathogens?
Well, as you can imagine, people like Governor Whitmer say nothing. Of course, she has encouraged Chinese investment into Michigan with these big battery plants and other things that are very controversial. For the farmers on the ground, though, we'll hear from them in just a few minutes. They take it very seriously. They know how vulnerable they are. They know if they can't defend against a fungus or a bacteria or another pathogen, not only will it shut down and destroy their farms, once it gets up into the jet stream, up into the air, these things spread. It may take a month or 2 or a year, but by the time it spreads, we're in real trouble, and by that point, it could be too late.
Yeah, that's right. Most of these are airborne. They move. The wind can move them from one location to another, and all of a sudden you have an outbreak all across this country. It's really scary stuff. I'm really excited about our first guest. She first blew the whistle back in in the summer of 2020 when she defected to the United States and told us that, just like we now know, that the COVID virus was in fact man-made and leaked from Wuhan virus. But today she is sounding the alarm about China's larger intentions with our food supply. Take a look at this incredible interview we did earlier this week with Dr. Li Mengyan. All right, joining us now, a person who was on the front lines of China's bio research, Chinese virologist and coronavirus whistleblower, Dr. Li Mengyan. Doctor, good to have you on the show.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me again.
It's a great honor. I want to start with a question I think a lot of Americans have, which is, why does China have research that tries to make viruses more deadly, like the coronaviruses that escaped from the Wuhan lab? And why is it that their researchers are now trying to bring in pathogens to the United States that have the potential to do great harm to our crops? What's the intention? Is China doing this for the good of science, or do they have a more malicious intent?
Oh, hi, John. These are the very good questions. And since I reviewed the COVID-19 origin, I keep telling people that I come from that regime. I know what they're doing. And I can tell you for sure that why they focus on bioweapon or bioterrorism, because according to CCP's doctrine, they believe that bioweapons are the poor people's nuclear weapons. So they treat it as the alternative form of the nuclear weapons with low cost, and it's very easy to manipulate the pathogens. So you say that during COVID-19, and they released weaponized COVID-19 from Wuhan to the United States and caused over millions of deaths and the trillions of loss. And also now you say just within several weeks this year, the FBI have caught CCP agents pretending to be the researchers smuggling the deadly fungus and also the roundworms, which can cause the biosecurity threats to the agriculture and human and animals in the U.S. through your custom. And also, more importantly, you will see that these researchers, they have their labs in the U.S. For example, in these two cases, the labs based in the University of Michigan could help them to do this kind of work. And if you do more research, you will see that CCP's infiltration deeply rooted in the University of Michigan, like how they rooted in Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and other U.S. universities. So China could pay very little cost, like some funding, some researchers provide materials, and working with CCP's espionages and also pro-CCP campaigns in the US to gain your high technology, gain your taxpayers' money, gain your resources, and make these weaponized pathogens to create damage to the US. Because here is the answer of your question, that the US, Americans are the primary enemy for communist China, for the CCP from the beginning when CCP was established.
Amazing.
You know, China is at war with America, even though America may not realize it, Doctor. They're targeting us when we're sitting here complacent too often. I read one of your articles here recently about how they're targeting, using quote-unquote innocent students to hide under that umbrella to introduce not just fungus and ringworm and roundworm like they did at the University of Michigan, but using genetic modification to alter plants, insects to destroy plants, viruses, bacteria, fungus, and other pathogens to destroy plants, and food shortages. That's the ultimate goal here, because if you can take the food away from somebody, you can certainly weaken America from the inside. Is that what you're seeing?
Oh, yes, I quoted the exact word from People's Liberation Army's textbook. This textbook named Biosecurity, and it was published at the early of Xi Jinping's regime around 2014. I read the full textbook, and this is not the only textbook talking about how to weaponize pathogens. And under this kind of fancy words about security, it clearly mentioned that the bioweapon targeting both human and also agriculture are the best one, because, either human or agriculture or both, because not only target the enemy, but also target their food supply chain. Like, for example, China tried to convince you that COVID-19 can spread through the cold chain because they want to also control the cold chain. Then that is the very important part of your food supply chain, right? And now you see the fungus and the roundworms. Both of these can hurt human, animal, and agriculture. So why China purchased a lot of land in the U.S.? Near the military, yes, that can be used as military espionage, but also, like, for example, the very famous case, the Fufeng Group purchased the land near the North Dakota military base. They also want to use that to make the bioterrorism and bioattacks in the unrestricted warfare. Because if you check the Fufeng Group's background, that agriculture company, they have the military civil fusion projects, working with CCP's leading bioweapon general Yang Ruifu from Academy of Military, Medical, and Science, who's also the leading expert in developing COVID-19 virus.
Doctor, I want to talk about the experience you have. You come to the United States, you blow the whistle on COVID-19, you say it's most likely genetically created in a lab, and the scientific community assails you any way possible. But it turns out from reporting we did the last few weeks that the DIA came to the exact same conclusion as you in early 2020 as well. Behind the scenes, were you talking to U.S. intelligence, the FBI, and were they taking your concerns seriously even as the scientific community tried to silence you?
I want to tell that first, I know this is truth when I provide that, so I'm always confident about that. I know one day, even after 100 years, that will be verified. And I provide this information to American government agencies and, for example, FBI. And I can tell that's why FBI was among the few intelligence agencies back to Biden administration telling that this is from the COVID-19 is from the Chinese lab. At that time, most of intelligence agencies said, oh, either I don't know or it come from the nature. So that shows how corrupt, how compromised these American scientists and some of the intelligence agencies are. Anyway, I want to say that there are some bureaucratical things always happen in your government and agencies. I hope that can be improved. But I want to say that we have more evidence, not only about the COVID-19 origin, but also during the past 5 years, accumulated from our exclusive sources around Xi Jinping and inside the CCP, talking about not only the COVID-19, and there are more similar bioweapon projects going on, and also there are more unrestricted warfare tactics going on. Some of them are very evil strategy, and all of their targets are Americans. So they want to destroy you. They are your number one enemy for your life and your future.
I think the hope here is maybe there's a different day when it comes to the intel community here in America. I say that because Kash Patel said, quote, smuggling a known agroterrorism agent into the U.S., not just a violation of law, a direct threat to national security. So they're watching closer than they have for the last 4 years. But you also make a tie to all the money that flows to American universities. University of Michigan, $54 million. And I think if we go around this country, you'll find other universities have the benefit of an open checkbook from the CCP. It buys a lot of cooperation and a lot of people looking the other way when these sorts of things are going on. That would be my assumption. What say you?
Oh, I would say that I work at the University of Hong Kong, and previously I studied in the top Chinese medical universities. And I can tell you that people who have the very good academic knowledge doesn't mean they are all the nice people. Actually, a lot of them are very greedy and easy can be bought. So China knows that. That's why they put the money to universities in the U.S. and bring these professors or experts to the China to get the collaboration, and then they compromise them. If someone among them cannot be compromised, then China will use the national power to isolate, to silence these people. So that's why back to 2014, when the U.S. experts believe that gain of function should be stopped, after several years, around 2017 to 2018, most of experts in the council reject gain of function are removed. And then the new expert involved into the council again support gain of function. So that's the change, and show you how China, if you give them time, they could use very little money compared to your taxpayers' money, compared to the government income. They use very little part to buy the scientists, the expert, the media, and then make them working in favor of Chinese Communist Party and harm Americans. So of course there must be more law that and other kind of regulation kind of countermeasures, intelligence countermeasures, because this is related to your national security. And previously, you gave too many opportunities to China.
Yeah. We just got about a minute left. Doctor, I want to ask one quick question, and that is, we had a story earlier this week. Hundreds of Chinese scientists have been brought here on visas by the National Institutes of Health. Is there any reason to believe that they're not here working for the interests of the Chinese Communist government on these programs you just talked about?
You mean the scientists getting visa?
The Chinese scientists, yes.
Scientists getting visa from China to the U.S., they are visiting scholars. They have signed the contract with Chinese government to go back to China, serve for China with whatever they can get from the U.S. That's why they get visa from Chinese government. So from the beginning, they already made a deal with CCP and become CCP's kind of agents. And so China lets these people come here, grab your intellectual properties, grab your technologies, compromise your people, and that is like the tumor, like the parasites go to your body, go to your country. So China uses these people, and that is China's national strategy. So U.S. government must treat it as national threats. Yeah, not only individual cases.
Yeah. So well said. Doctor, you made the courage to actually go blow the whistle on what China was doing. Our scientific community impugned you for a while, but history has shown you told us the truth, and now the rest of the American government agrees with you. A great honor to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. See you next time.
Yes, what a great conversation. What an extraordinary woman. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, a lot more on this very important topic of agroterrorism right after these messages.
All right, welcome back. Now, over the last couple of weeks, I've traveled to speak with real farmers in their fields to ask about what they think about the dangers of agroterrorism. And I've got to say, what they told me about the fragility of our food supply will give you pause.
The problem with Americans is they look at war as a binary question. Most believe we're either at war with another country or we're not. It seems they've lost the concept of the Cold War that lasted from the waning days of World War II until the waning days of the Reagan-Bush era in 1991 and 92.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The Chinese, however, know perfectly well they are at war with the United States, and they are executing that war every single day. They deliver attacks on high-tech targets, steal intellectual property, plant moles in the private sector, academia, and the highest levels of government. We've witnessed cyber attacks as the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, CISA, have highlighted Chinese operations targeting U.S. tech companies, universities, and government agencies, too. Intellectual theft, according to numerous estimates, could be $600 billion a year, and espionage is ongoing, highlighted by cases like the 2020 arrest of a Chinese military officer posing as a U.S. college student. And those are just some easy examples. Chinese warfare in America is ubiquitous. And unless we wake up, and soon, they could win this war. Because they're fighting on battlefields we don't know exist, or at least don't pay attention to. And one of the most disturbing is unfolding in the nation's heartlands.
Bioterrorism.
Bioterrorism.
Biowarfare.
Yes, warfare. Warfare without firing a shot.
Mark Benjamin is a sixth-generation farmer in southern Michigan. His family began feeding the nation sometime around 1880.
And his forefathers and mothers have been turning this ground ever since.
They faced the Great Depression, floods, droughts, and tornadoes as well. But Mark says the recent arrest of several Chinese students from the University of Michigan carrying fungus designed to attack corn, beans, wheat, and rice is an all-new threat, and one that he takes quite seriously.
From what you've read, from what you've figured out, an enhanced fungus that maybe is fungicide resistant, and that's what you're reading. What would it mean? What could it mean?
Right now, we can treat the diseases on wheat and corn with a fungicide. But the stuff that's third person snuck into the U.S. is stuff that they can use to make the disease resistant to our fungicides.
And what would that mean?
That would mean that easily wipe out half the crop.
Half?
Half, easy, if it's on wheat. Right now, every year we're dealing with it, even sometimes when it's treated for it, you'll still get docked if the wheat has too much vomitoxin in it.
If you look around, you know, wheat, corn, beans, whatever field you look at, if the United States lost half of its crop, because once it was here, the fungus spreads naturally, doesn't it? It just gets in the air and it goes.
Yeah, it's airborne, and of course, it could be spread intentionally anywhere. And when you get the right weather conditions with the right amount of rain and the winds, it'll spread.
If America lost half of its crop, what would that mean?
If the fungus was to be enhanced so it's more potent, and then also enhanced so we can't control the fungicides, and we lose half a crop for a couple of years, then you're starting to talk about massive world starvation.
That's right, famine, like America has never known. Because from the first days of Europeans settling this nation, there's always been farmland, and not just ordinary farmland, but the most productive land in the world. And for the last 150 years, America and the American farmers have fed the world. In fact, America currently exports about 25% of its grain production annually. The impact of an agricultural failure here would be felt around the world, especially in areas where food insecurity is already an issue, like sub-Saharan Africa. Back roads like this have been the backbone of America from the beginning of this country. Farms, farmland. They've fed a nation. In fact, we've fed the world. But now farmers here in places like this, they're worried. They're worried that their lifestyle is being taken away, their farms are going bankrupt, and they're now being targeted by China. And they're worried because they know how ruthless China can be, especially when it comes to things like bioterrorism.
If they're willing to sneak in fungus now, and they probably have snuck in fungus before, or any other pest, or any other genetics, if we're catching them already, we can expect them to ramp it up, you know, especially as world tensions are escalating. They're going to use any method they can find to mess with us and give themselves an advantage over us.
And if they starve us to death, they probably don't care, do they?
No, they don't care, and that's where we need to rely on our politicians and government to, you know, help prevent it.
Alex Clark is another family farmer who's deeply concerned about what he sees on the news and reads in the headlines. And he's frustrated. Because to him, Washington is very slow to react to the clear and emerging threat of bioterror and using weapons as simple as enhanced fungus to take down the nation. Instead of banning China from owning American farmland, production facilities, and even seed companies, Washington remains silent, placated by lobbyists and a whole lot of Chinese money.
Doesn't that bother you? I mean, here you are, fourth generation family farm, honestly. China shows up, they buy the seed company, they buy the meat packing company, they send their scientists here to steal intellectual property when we make advancements at Michigan State or Texas A&M or Ohio State or wherever it is. They either buy their way in or sneak their way in.
It's upsetting because for like my brother and I, we're a relatively small operation. We don't have any control over what China's doing. We don't have any control over what they're doing in, you know, Chicago or Toledo in terms of prices. So we're kind of at the mercy of our country, and we're competing with these Chinese, you know, actors that are most likely manipulating them. We know they manipulate the markets with, you know, dipping into surpluses or changing their imports and exports. It affects us, you know, directly.
Every day.
Directly and indirectly every day.
So what if? What if China took the next step to destroy American crops? What would that mean? Well, according to Mark Benjamin, the damage would be far worse than hunger and bread lines. He believes it could destroy the nation altogether.
You take out the U.S. economy. How? Farms fail. You have massive bank problems if the U.S. agriculture is hit with this. Okay, farms fail. Average house in the USA, $58,000 of somebody's mortgage is just for the land the house is sitting on. You wipe out U.S. farms, land values crash to practically nothing. All of a sudden, overnight, housing mortgages are upside down because the land it's sitting on that costs $58,000 is now worth $1,000, $2,000. And then that's a problem for all the banks. And we go back to the same housing crisis with mortgage crisis we had 10, 15 years ago. And then the U.S. is spending all its money to try to keep that afloat, and we're no longer able to invest in defense.
So China brings in a fungus, creates an agricultural failure, creates a failure of farms, creates a crash in the price of land, creates a bank panic, creates a default by the federal government. Is that about right?
One domino after another. Yes.
So are we at war? It's pretty clear we are. It's pretty clear that China has been targeting us on every level, from supply chains to the energy grid, and now our food. And if you can take out the food supply, as you've now heard, you could bring down the entire nation. Like Mark said, you could do it without firing a shot.
Is it an act of war?
It's an act of war, yes.
So what will it take for Americans to recognize the clear and present danger that is China?
And what will Washington do to protect our farms from being destroyed by pests delivered intentionally? The bottom line is this: targeting American agriculture is just another strategy in the Chinese approach of asymmetrical warfare, designed to weaken America from the inside out and do lasting damage to us economically, socially, and politically.
An act of war without firing a shot. Pretty frightening, right? You bet we're going to stay on top of this story, because if you've just seen what a foreign power could do to our food supply with very little effort, I might add, it's incredibly dangerous. And the government needs to start doing more to protect us right now. We'll have more for you after the break. Stay right there. Welcome back to this special report. John Solomon and I looking into a topic tonight that isn't often discussed but should be. We're talking about America's food supply, how fragile it really is, and we got a good reminder of that after the FBI announced they had arrested 2 Chinese scientists for smuggling a toxic fungus into my home state of Michigan. A third has now been arrested. So do we have in place the safeguards we need? Joining us now, someone who can help answer that. She represents the great state of Illinois, is on the House Agriculture Committee, Congresswoman Mary Miller. Congresswoman, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Also, my husband and I farm in central Illinois, so I can tell you as a representative from the ag community and then being on the ag committee that having open borders was a concern for us in light of agroterrorism. And, you know, here we are, we've got proof.
Sure.
And one thing I don't want people to do is to forget the damage that Joe Biden did when he opened up the border. Never forget.
How concerned were you, Congresswoman, when you heard about these University of Michigan students coming in? I mean, where you live is the heart of corn country. It's corn, it's beans, it's wheat. It's along the Mississippi River, a huge part of central Illinois. It would destroy American farms, wouldn't it?
Yes. Well, this particular case is some kind of fungus that would cause a blight in grains such as wheat and barley, but it also causes illness in humans. But we let so many people in. Joe Biden basically advertised and incentivized the invasion, but we know that tens of thousands of Chinese nationals walked across the border. So not only those that we let in and gave them student visas and they're on our campuses doing supposed research, we have all these other ones that walked in. It's a terrible problem because China is our enemy. They've infiltrated all of our institutions. They are not to be trusted. And, you know, we need to backtrack on who's here and what their intentions are.
Yeah, Congresswoman, we had a story the other day on Just the News confirming that the Trump administration is investigating more than 1,000 NIH researchers who were given visas from the NIH, but they hail from countries that are called countries of concern, those who are hostile to the United States. China is the largest portion of that 1,000. The reason that investigation was launched, these scientists apparently weren't properly vetted when they were first let in. Congress has a lot of oversight capabilities. Is this an agency, NIH, that maybe needs to be reined in a little bit?
Absolutely. And the American people want to know who's coming here and why the whole world wants to come here. We should be choosy about who's coming and where they're coming from. And they need to be properly vetted. We know under the Biden administration, even the people that came during the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, that many of them were not properly vetted. So we need to backtrack and go back and find out who's here and do proper vetting on them.
Yeah, no doubt.
When it comes time to do that vetting and looking for answers, Congressman, my question is this. Look, there's a lot of money behind this. A lot of money being pumped in by the CCP into academia, into agricultural companies. China controls meatpacking plants like Smithfield. They control Syngenta, which is a seed company. I mean, they've got their tentacles into all these different areas of agriculture, and I just feel like it's the Wild West. What say you?
It's a national security issue, and I'm glad that we have someone, President Trump, at the top that loves our country and cares and recognizes it and has the courage to not only speak out against it, but to stand up against it. And we need to halt immigration and student visas from China, definitely, as well as many other countries that are known enemies.
Yeah. Congresswoman, the Ag Committee's been very busy this year, and for the first time in a long time, farmers are getting some of the policy attention they were denied under a Democratic Congress, Democratic president. What are some of the most important initiatives in your committee right now looking to aim to protect the food supply, grow the food supply, make sure that we don't have an artificially caused famine because of one of our enemies?
Well, I mean, the borders have to be secured. And like I said, we need to go back and do a backtracking on our vetting process for the student visas, especially in the, we have a land grant university at the University of Illinois, and we have a lot of Chinese nationals there on student visas, and we need to backtrack on that vetting process. But a lot of important things coming up for the ag community. The farmers are hurting big time because of 4 years of out of control inflation and then passive trade policy. And right now we're looking at below break-even prices for our grain. It's a serious issue. We gotta, be there to support our producers. The American people don't want corporate ag taking over our food supply. We've had that in the protein processing. You brought it up. 1 out of our 4 main protein processors is owned by China. Another one's owned by Brazil. This should not. It's a national security issue.
That's a great point.
You touched on something really important there, and that is half of the pigs alive in America today are Chinese-owned. Smithfield, the giant packing company, is owned by China since 2004. These are great topics. And you mentioned, Congresswoman, the family farm there. You have one there in Illinois. Family farms are going bankrupt at an ever faster rate, while corporate farming continues to gobble up land and power. And they seem to be, and maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I am, but it would seem to me watching this, they're more susceptible to all that money coming from China and anywhere else that doesn't have our best interest in mind. Is that a concern of yours?
It's definitely a concern. And like I say, a lot of our policies that we're implementing are driving consolidation in the industry. And one of the things I'm going to bring up is the green scam, which I'm very thrilled that President Trump is speaking out against it. The big, beautiful bill that we passed and went to the Senate is rolling back the IRA tax credits. Not one Republican voted for it. But they are covering, I could tell you in Illinois, they're covering Class A and Class B farm ground, the best farm ground in the world with solar panels and windmills. And a lot of those people are, that are bellied up to these subsidies, they don't own the land there. But the ones that do, they're the ones now that have the money to go buy overpriced farm ground or out rent their options. And it will cause consolidation in agriculture. Not to mention, it's really bad management of our beautiful land.
Yeah, I want to just ask real quickly, the Big Beautiful Bill has a lot of provisions that will benefit the family farmer, also ensure that the family farmer is able to bring its generations down and without having to sell the farm because of taxes and death taxes. Could you tell us how important some of those provisions are to farmers?
it's very important. We got to pass the tax or make the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. We've got to make sure that's put in permanent law. And that's one of the most important things in that big, beautiful bill. And, I just think the whole economy will be heading to recession if we don't get that passed quickly. I think the markets are nervous. And I could tell you at the family farm, it will be gone if we don't get that, because the taxes, not being able to write off investments quickly, and then also pass the farm on to the next generation, not just for the family farm, but also for family businesses, small businesses.
Yeah, so important.
Mm-hmm.
Very important. We appreciate you being here, Congresswoman. I'll give you the last word here, because the family farm's in trouble. It's being attacked by large agricultural interests. It's being attacked by governments from overseas, and possibly by, could be fungus, could be a ringworm, could be a pathogen of unknown origin. A lot of concerns for the farm in America. I'll give you the last word.
Well, I think that we need to look at the policies that have been hurting the family farmer. We need to make sure that energy is cheap, tamping down inflation, which President Trump understands all these things, but also we need to have a robust trade policy. And I'm appalled that we have imported, I believe in the last couple of years, we have imported billions of pounds of hamburger into our country. We have every ability to be producing our own beef, but we have bad policies that disincentivize beef production. And so I think we need to look at those things and get us back on track to be highly productive in our ag sector.
Congresswoman, I think we all agree with that. Congresswoman Mary Miller of Illinois, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Greatly appreciate it. All right, we'll take a break and be right back on Just the News, No Noise. All right, welcome back to this special edition of Just the News, No Noise. A little earlier, I had the chance to speak to an expert who's been predicting we may see a global famine, and soon. He had some interesting perspectives on just what could cause it. Listen to this. Well, as we know, the world's population is growing fast, but when it comes to the question of a global food crisis, opinions are divided. On one side, there are those who warn that we're running out of resources needed to feed billions of people on the planet. On the other side, skeptics that call that fear overblown. Just another round of doomsday predictions, they say. But in his book, The Coming Famine, author Julian Cribb sides with the warning camp. He joins me now from Australia. Julian, thank you for joining us here.
Good evening.
Now, as you know, we were discussing just before you came on how vulnerable the food supplies are, regardless of what the cause might be. And I want to go over this a little bit. So I want people to understand we're really just a moment away at any given time of having starvation on this planet, whatever the cause. Could be a pathogen brought in by the Chinese, could be a drought, could be a flood, could be weather patterns that create problems and cause crop failure in the United States or Canada, South America, Ukraine, wherever that problem may be. You tell me we're only a few weeks away at any given moment from having a full-blown famine in great parts of this world. Tell me about that.
Yes, that's correct. Generally, there are 12 to 16 weeks of grain in store worldwide. And then another harvest comes in, whether it's in the northern hemisphere or whether it's in the southern hemisphere. And that keeps on rolling. And that's what keeps the food in the supermarkets worldwide. Now, the thing you've got to bear in mind is there are 25 billion meals being eaten every single day. 25 billion meals, right? And if there's any glitch in that supply, then people starve. And when people starve, governments come down. So you can get a fairly catastrophic failure in short order. And let me just run through it. You mentioned resources. Around a third of the world's topsoil has already been lost. Okay, that's a well-attested scientific figure. We're losing 75 billion tons of soil just by farming every single year. Okay, so within 50 years, we're going to run out of soil. We're running out of water. Fresh water is in extremely scarce supply in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in North China, in the North Indian Plain. All of those places around the world we're running out of water. Now, water grows 40% of the world's food on irrigation. Okay, so if you run out of that water, you can't grow that food. So that's another vulnerability. The next thing is that we're using 5 million tons of highly toxic pesticides in agriculture around the world every single year. And those are having a very untoward effect on the health of the soil and on the farming environment. Okay, and we don't
and those
always
are all
know
critical
exactly
factors.
what that effect is, but it's a negative one.
Right. They're all factors here, but this whole emergency famine, if you will, could be expedited by a pathogen being brought in that could cause crop failure long before any of those things that you just laid out would become a concern. Do you concern yourself with what we call bioterrorism, agroterrorism? Somebody introducing a parasite, a bug, a fungus, a bacteria, any of those things. Do you concern yourself on such things?
Yes, indeed. I mean, anthrax was used against the horses that pulled the guns in World War One. So bioterrorism is a not unfamiliar thing. People have been thinking about it for well over 100 years. And there are people tinkering, as we know now, with dangerous viruses and bacteria of various kinds. And genetic engineering is creating new and untoward strains of these things. So it's quite possible. But the qualifier is that if you released something like that, it would start off having a very local effect. And if you could quarantine it, then you could control it. But the problem now is that there are, out of the 30,000 edible plants on the world, we eat 6 main crops. And that makes those crops terribly vulnerable to new pathogens,
Certainly.
whether they're man-made or not. So wheat.
Right. My
corn,
suggestion.
rice, all of that. And
That's
we're
correct.
reliant on
Wheat,
12
corn,
different kinds of
rice,
animals.
barley. Clearly, but the concern would be if one country had created a pest-resistant or a fungus-resistant strain of corn or rice or whatever the case might be, before they released the pathogen into the rest of the world, they could eat when others couldn't. You could have a man-made catastrophe for some and maybe not for others. A designed famine. That's what concerns me here tonight.
It generally takes several years for a pathogen, a new pathogen like wheat rust, for example, to spread around the world. So the chances are that you can quarantine and that you can breed resistant strains before it arrives in your neck of the woods. It depends where you are, and it depends where it's released, and it depends how much grain you are shipping from that area around the world, and therefore transporting, helping to distribute the mechanism, the pest. So yes, look, it's a vulnerability, but like biological warfare compared to nuclear warfare, it's not the worst possibility.
Yeah, America exports 25% of its grain, 25%. So if America had a failure, regardless of cause, places like sub-Saharan Africa would pay the price in hunger in a way that other less vulnerable places would not. I'll give you the last word, sir.
Most of America's grain is used for feeding cattle and livestock. So that would be the industry worst hit first. We'd run out of meat, basically. But let me say this, we can overcome all of these problems if we go to renewable food. We need to go to renewable food, which is food that is not produced agriculturally, that is climate resistant, and which is not grown on farms, basically. Then you can feed everybody, everywhere in the world, safely.
And we'll save that conversation for the next time around. Julian Cribb, really appreciate you being here. The book is The Coming Famine. If you want to read it, I suggest you do and find out more and be prepared. Julian, thank you so much for being here. It's all fascinating, isn't it? Okay, so coming up next, John and I will have some final thoughts on what we've learned tonight. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, America. Just a few minutes left in this very special discussion. I've really been honored to be joined tonight by my amazing colleague, Steve Gruber. This is an important topic, and I'm going to bring Steve right in. Steve, I walked away today with 2 incredible impressions, and I feel like I know a lot of things being in Washington, but when you listen to Dr. Yen and you see literally the program that China has, that every scientist that's going to come to the United States signing a contract, they're giving their orders, and as she said, they act like parasites, sucking all of our knowledge out of us and taking it back so that one day they can destroy us. It's a pretty dramatic moment in the show. We gotta educate the Americans that this is the Chinese's plan.
We certainly do. Look, the farmers I talked to, they know that it's out there because they see they're buying seeds from China, some of them.
Right.
They're buying fertilizer from China, some of them. So they realize that it's a back and forth, and they realize these tentacles are in there. But you look at these pathogens being brought in, University of Michigan, for example, and this sends a chill down their spine. They know that China has somewhere close to 500,000 acres of farmland in America. And that's not a significant amount. It's less than 1%. Right. Until you realize that it's not just the farmland. If they want to come in and contaminate American farms, they don't have to go to Mark Benjamin's. They don't have to go to Alex Clark's. They can go right to their own farm and put that pathogen on the crops that they're growing themselves and then get them airborne. They know that. And the other thing, John, as you know, these pieces of farmland that the Chinese are buying up are also close to strategic military operations for the United States military. So that's another concerning aspect of this farmland being gobbled up.
Yeah, listen, the Chinese are playing four-dimensional chess in hopes that they will defeat us without ever having to fire a shot. And I think tonight we got to see just how sophisticated their game plan is and how vulnerable we are. The other thing that struck me tonight was listening to those interviews with the farmers. We really are more vulnerable to a famine, more vulnerable to a sudden crop disaster than I appreciated until I heard from those farmers. Those are pretty poignant stories.
They really, I mean, there was a time in America when we had long-term storage of grain, for example. But the way the supply chain works now, you know, Kellogg's or whoever, I use Kellogg's, they're a Michigan company, they bring the grain in, they push it out, they bring the grain in, they push it out. Then they wait for Argentina to deliver their products because those two seasons rotate. So you've got the American crop, then you've got the South American crop, then you've got the Asian crop. And so the way the supply chains work, okay, everything's great, right until there's a miss in the supply chain. When America gets shut down in Illinois, where Mary Miller's from, or you have a problem in Michigan or Iowa, you have a problem in one of those places, and then it starts to steamroll. The domino effect comes into place, like Mark Benjamin mentioned. You lose a couple of harvests. And he's told me this for years. I've known Mark for a number of years. We're 2 failed harvests away. And like they also discussed, and I talked about, it's America getting hit, but then it's sub-Saharan Africa. It's Asia, where they cannot afford the food insecurity they already have. The ripple effect across this planet, John, is frightening. Yes, we'll face something in America we've never seen, but the rest of the world could suffer worse and first.
It is amazing, and in the sophistication of how the Chinese have set the table in case they want to call on this option is so scary. Mary Miller was pretty adamant today that Congress has to do more. They have to get in the game. I've been learning a lot about these scientists. I've been going literally scientist by scientist, 1,000 that come from these hostile countries, and they're now being vetted for the first time. A lot of them get in through the back door, which is that NIH doesn't say we're giving an award to China. They give it to an American vendor, and then the American vendor subcontracts it. So it's even hidden on the books. It takes 2 jumps to find the Chinese trail. The Chinese are brilliant. They're working on one now where they go to a famous hospital chain. They make a donation. They get in good with them. And then all of a sudden, subcontracts coming in, and they're doing all this work. We would never know unless you could look 2 layers down. This is a sophisticated operation on Beijing's part.
And let me say one thing about that. The same thing is true in academia. When they come into the University of Michigan or Texas A&M or the University of Iowa, whatever the land-grant college is where they're focusing on agriculture, they come in with big checks. And all these universities want the money because right now they're strapped for cash. So, easy money from China, we'll take it. We'll just kind of go with it and see what happens. And it's leaving us unprotected and in a perilous position because they're in such need of the money, they're willing to look the other way. I think that's a problem, and that is frightening in and of itself.
Yeah. One of the FBI agents I talked to for these stories said, we don't have an Achilles heel. We have a wallet that is our weakness. China buys their way in, and then we have an addiction. It's an amazing thing. Steve, this was so much fun. We're going to do this again next month. We're going to keep this conversation going. Going to get some cabinet secretaries, maybe an FBI director in here, but we team up again in another month. I really enjoyed this day, and thank you for coming up with such a great idea.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of fun. What a great journalist. So lucky to share the network with him. All right, folks, that is it for tonight. We're going to hand off to the amazing Grant Stinchfeld. Back tomorrow night. Amanda will be in the chair. I'll be on the road. We'll see you then.